Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and today we're going to talk about the campaign guide to Zakhara. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's a book that I'm very excited to talk about because I'm a fan of Middle Eastern mythology, things like Sinbad, Aladdin, things like that, 1001 Nights, all that stuff. I'm really I just love those stories. I'm glad that I'm glad that these stories are now going to be available we could play them in fifth edition. So before we go on, I'll go ahead and let our guests introduce themselves.
Well, hello, I'm Brock. I had to double check the credits a minute ago. I was co-designer, co-editor, proofer, and ran all the playtesting groups for Campaign Guide Zakhara.
I'm Gregory Lent. I publish as GM Lent. The Al Qadim update, I did the bulk of the actual writing, though Brock was the one who turned it into readable English. I also found all the art, put it together, did the graphic design and the layout as well.
Okay, all right, excellent. So I'll start by asking, what is the biggest changes from in this book compared to I guess old school second edition?
The biggest one was our focus on steering away from some not so great topics. The original setting dealt pretty openly with slavery. They had a not surprising but unfortunate obsession with how many wives various rulers had. And they leaned a little more, I think, even than they intended to, into the aspect of religious zealotry, all of which play into stereotypes that haven't been, justified or even vaguely cool for 200 years, if ever. And so working the setting to remove most of that problematic content was probably one of the biggest challenges, and but it was one of the most important parts of doing this in the first place. We didn't need any Orientalism, we didn't need any sexism, and we certainly didn't need to idolize or beef up how great it was to have lots of wives and slaves.
Okay, and if I may ask, where did you go to try to get the correct information? What was the process behind that?
Well, one of the big challenges with the setting, of course, is that everything it's founded upon is works by white guys, frankly. The 1001 Nights, as you're probably aware, was a French historian's collection of a bunch of West Asian stories. He added a couple of them. You mentioned Aladdin, Sinbad. The Aladdin and Alibaba were added by the French guy in the, I think, 1600s when he was doing his translations. Hollywood went to town with all kinds of Arabian Nights styled films in the 50s and 60s, which of course starred pretty much exclusively white guys, and the Al Qadim setting was based upon that collectively. So a challenge we had was that this is very much a white guy's take on the Asian myths in the first place, and walking the line between remaining true to the basic design of Al Qadim while not perpetuating the harmful stereotypes that it even inadvertently included was another challenge as far as that was concerned. We were fortunate that Ahmed Al-Jabri, also known as D20 Arabia, came on as a consultant and as a assistant editor, really, and he very much helped in identifying problematic areas, things that even we hadn't seen with this explicit intention. He reached out also, we collectively reached out even to Jeff Grubb, who wrote the original Arabian Adventures book, for clarification on some of the terminology, some of the words, and not really advice on how best to proceed, but clarification on what he meant so that we had more information to move forward.
So in this new book, what can people that purchase your product expect to see? What have you done? Like, let's say we come to like classes and species, feats and things like that. What tools are there available?
Would you like to talk for a bit, Brock?
Sure. That was to some extent the division between us was since I ran a lot of the playtesting, a lot of the rules sets got their final shape after they got banged on by players for a while. So there are multiple subclasses to handle taking those original, very specific Al Qadim classes and trying to make them fit a 5th edition style. It was easier for some than others. We certainly did not feel bound to like maintain every limitation that you get from a game mechanic perspective through 2nd edition. There's an attempt to sort of reimagine how you could have that same role, but in a world ran by 5e, if you see what I mean. The certainly the biggest change, sort of the most complicated one, is the Sayre. That's such an iconic class for the setting that we really had to get it right. How many Sayres did we go through, Gregory? 3, 4?
At least.
Yeah, we made there's a wizard version, a sorcerer version. We experimented a lot. Ultimately, the warlock that we created that really sort of captures the spell casting style of the 2nd edition Sayre anyway, I think is weird, but in a good way. When I presented it to my playtesters, there was definitely a sense of, what is this? But it was popular after they got to see it in action. I believe there are some new feats associated with that. Those maybe appear in a different book.
Yeah, we have some of this material scattered across a couple of different things. We have a Sayre document that includes the wizard subclass and some additional information for the Sayre, and then our first big release, Midnight in the City of Brass, has some warlock invocations as well, specific to the class.
That's where the feats are. Someday I see a bundle in the future.
That's right. One of the other challenges we had, of course, is that we weren't the first to tackle the Al Qadim archetypes for 5th edition. And we saw no real reason to reinvent the wheel any more than absolutely necessary. And that combined with an idea of keeping things cosmopolitan, allowing more different types of characters to take on more different types of roles, led to us, once again, in Midnight in the City of Brass, but definitely carrying through this book, reintroduce the idea of a template independent of your class or race or background. In 2nd edition, those were called kits. We kept that naming convention just because it was convenient and it was something to hook onto. But these kits are pretty much like enhanced backgrounds. You don't take them until 5th level or so. And for the most part, they just give you a slight mechanical boost to a very role-playing oriented aspect of the character. And they were phenomenally popular with our playtesters. An example there, of course, is one of the other iconic Al Qadim kits or subclasses from 2nd edition was the Barber, which is, interestingly enough, not even an Arabian concept. It seems to have arisen largely due to the way Europeans saw Arabian immigrants in the 15, 16, 1700s. Which makes it unfortunate, but it's another one of those aspects where it's so key to the setting and what people would expect from an update of the setting that we couldn't just leave it out. But in our incarnation, anybody could be a barber. You just meet the general qualifications, which includes some performance, some tool proficiencies, things like that, and it just makes you better at using those skills and telling stories. It's not limited solely to rogues or thieves as the second edition version was, and it's emblematic of our approach across the board, really.
Yeah, if I could speak to that for just a moment, the barber particularly, as well as just the kits, certainly a lot of my players would just choose the kit that sort of like was like the most obvious choice for their class. You know, they'd come into it and be like, I want to play this guy from second edition. You know, and then others would totally take a kit that was like a 90-degree angle from their actual class setup. You know, and so that was very interesting. It allowed them to really experiment. One of my players who took the barber was actually super excited about it because he was like, my Lebanese grandfather was a barber. I get, you know, like, you know, he was like super pumped, you know, about that one in particular, for example. I don't think he may have been playing a bard, admittedly, so it worked out like well conceptually with that. But yeah, they were very popular. And I did have one player who didn't take them. They just didn't feel it, and which was worked out fine. It didn't actually affect power balance, you know, because of the way they're designed. You know, it's not like you're getting a +1 to everything you do all day.
So if I may ask, I mean, you could have done, I mean, I know Wizards of the Coast love focusing on Sword Coast, and you could have focused on almost anywhere else in Forgotten Realms. Why did you choose this part of that world? What was it about it that really called to you to write about this?
Well, I'll take this one since that started with me. Literally since 1993, the Al Qadim campaign setting has been pretty much my favorite thing that ever happened to Dungeons and Dragons. Spelljammer and Eberron both are close runners-up, and my introduction to basically everything was Dragonlance, which didn't work out for me personally as a campaign setting, but once Al Qadim stuff hit, I just took it and ran. I loved all of it, every part of it. And so ever since 5th edition hit, I'd been integrating Al Qadim stuff into my game anyway. And then I was part of a different collective in early 2016, working on updating Al Qadim to 5th edition. We had some disagreements about how to approach all of it, and the group ended up fracturing. But I took the portion that I had written for that, which was actually summaries and descriptions of all of the cities and the desert tribes in Zakhara. I took that and decided that, you know what, I'm just going to keep this and keep going with our vision on it, what Brock and I had been talking about for years, and push it through. And the book more than quadrupled in size, and then it came out. To, I guess, more directly answer that question, as far as, you know, sure, we could write about anywhere in the Forgotten Realms, but part of the appeal of Zakhara is that even though it's always been part of the Forgotten Realms, it feels completely different from the rest of it. Down to the way religions work, there is nothing for the time of troubles. There's nothing for any of the big tumultuous world-shaking events in the Forgotten Realms in any of the official Zakhara materials. It exists kind of outside of all that. There's not even a correlation between the Zakharan calendar and the Forgotten Realms calendar at large. So I guess one of the big advantages is it allowed us to completely ignore the meta plot. But we also wanted to set the book up such that if people didn't want to ignore the meta plot, they didn't have to. We kept things pretty consistent with the second edition materials, but definitely allowed some room to breathe if people wanted to incorporate some of the changes through third, well, not so much third, but fourth and fourth edition, and some of the other Forgotten Realms events going on.
Okay, excellent. So let's talk about the technical aspects or the elements of the book. Is there a chapter about like game master tools? Is there a chapter about the bestiary? How is the book broken up when it comes to subject matter?
Yeah, so there's absolutely a bestiary. So there's a monster chapter. I couldn't tell you how many monsters are in it off the top of my head, but it felt like a lot.
Hmm.
Gregory might know an approximate number, but
It's somewhere in the neighborhood of 60. It depends on whether you count variants as monsters or not.
sure.
There are a
And
lot
so,
of, you can also do this type things.
yeah, it's a significant portion of all the old monsters from the second edition stuff. We have an adventure, I believe, in it. Takes you from first to third level in the capital city, Hazuz. Helps you sort of get introduced to the setting, which is literally part of the purpose of that adventure. Is a lot of folks who didn't play it back in the second edition days, they may read the book, they may like the book, but then they're like, so how do I have the feel? Right. So that's part of the hope of that adventure is to show, it's more than just combat. It's about a certain you should expect a certain amount of social interaction of various sorts, just thematically. Like he was saying earlier, we've got a whole section just listing the cities and the rulers and the tribes, all the geography. Then, of course, there's chapters of subclasses. There's not a magic item chapter because that will be coming as a separate work next week. And
Oh, is that the image behind you? That's the name of the coming
yes,
book?
yes.
Oh, okay. Is it Kazer? Oh,
Yes, Kazerabet's Keepsakes will be the title.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'll make sure to put a link to it
Sure.
when it's
Yeah.
out in the.
Kazerabet appears heavily throughout the history of D&D. The second edition complete Necromancer's Handbook was sort of a stealth Al Qadim expansion, and so we made sure that those elements also made it in. We do have a whole section just talking about how to run it, our philosophy behind the choices we made. We make sure we talk about that up front and early, about words we dropped and bits we changed.
How many pages is the book?
290.
Oh, wow.
The PDF is 290 because it has the front and rear cover on it. The book itself, if you get the hardcover, is 288. That, of course, includes the introduction. That includes, it's a substantial size book. No two ways about it.
Okay. So if I may ask, if I was the dungeon master for this and we were playing this, what would you be in this world? What would be your favorite thing to be?
What would I be?
Yes.
My favorite class forever and ever and ever has actually been the Thief. I'm a big fan of the 5th edition Thief because of the flexibility, the way we design some of the archetypes. I think what I'd probably end up doing is I would be a Thief Sha'ir. We didn't tie the Sha'ir concept to a class. It is one of our kits, and it's basically going back to historic Arabian culture. Our Sha'ir is somebody who is skilled at negotiating with genies. Now, there's no evidence that anybody back in the Abbasid dynasty ever actually consulted with genies, but the people who said they could were called Sha'irs. We took that and ran with it. So if I was going to play a character out of this book, I would play a Thief Sha'ir.
And how about
probably
you, Brock?
a human, because I pretty much always play humans.
And how about you, Brock?
Well, one of the things I've always liked about the Al Qadim setting is the relatively high levels of racial harmony. Right? The entire setting, there isn't the whole like goblins and gnomes kill each other on sight and all that. Like everybody's pretty cool with each other. So I think pretty much every Al Qadim game that I've ever played in that Gregory ran, I have never played a human.
Not ever.
I have always gone for whatever I could get away with. So I'd probably be digging deep through the 5th edition material, and would be going for something really unusual. Like, the last time I played an ogre, I loved my ogre. So
no ogre in this book either. That's also coming soon.
Yes, that's coming soon. That was compulsory as far as I was concerned. But I tend to like a little bit of magic with a character, but with a good sort of tactical feel to them. So in 5th edition, I love me a battle master, multi-classed with some sort of a caster. So I might end up with battle master and maybe a little bit of our warlock. That would be intriguing. We'll fight right alongside you, Jin. Then.
Right.
All right, excellent. Is there anything about the book that you're excited about that I haven't asked you about yet?
I'm not sure about excited about. The introduction to the book is fairly lengthy. It's actually all in the preview on DM's Guild because it's also very important, laying out what we were doing, why we were doing it, some of the changes that we went with. One of them that people might notice if they're familiar with the older material is that we do not use any terminology that is specific to Muslim culture. The original materials referred to mosques and imams and things like that. Those are very specifically Islamic terms and positions, and this is not a reflection of any real world culture or religion despite its obvious roots. So we use the term temple and we use the term preacher. We use the term shrine. So that's an aspect in which we stripped out all references to all use of real world religious terms that are specific to Islam and, specific to Islam, frankly, and also played up the multicultural roots of the setting a little bit more as well. In addition to including characters, some of the NPCs, some of the major characters, even some of our pre-gens, we have non-binary characters. We have a greater degree of female or at least feminine presenting characters in there. In our list of Zakhara names, we refer to them as generally masculine and generally feminine names, not male and female, because it's in a world that is as cosmopolitan and polycultural as Zakhara has always been depicted as being. It seemed a logical step to be as inclusive as possible, frankly.
Excellent. Wow. I'm really excited to read this. Thank you both for taking the time to talk to us and share us about this book. Viewers, go check it out. This is the 4th day it's been out, and it's the 4th day it's been #1 on DM's Guild. And I'll put a link below for those that want to go directly to check it out after this. And I'll also put a link for the upcoming Magic Items book. And I love books about magic items. Those are always great to go through.
That'll be Tuesday.
All right. And to everyone out there, thank you for watching. Stay safe and have a great day.